So I consider it a great privilege and an honor to be invited to speak to the members of my beloved club. I became a member in August 1958, 64 years ago. I'm proud to be a member of this auspicious 131-year-old club. And I have nothing but good to wish for its continued growth and success. I have to congratulate the club on its growth and its achievements over the years, and to thank all those persons who have served on the various management committees from time to time. But however, there's a special expression of appreciation for Selwyn Gomes, who has served the club as our treasurer for 30 years, which I think is a good achievement. Now, my presentation is in the form of a timeline, in other words, in chronological order, beginning with 1891, when the club was formed. Then in 1920, on the 31st of March 1920, the Royal Victoria Institute was destroyed by fire. The members of the club assisted in rebuilding and replacing the natural history exhibits when the building had been rebuilt. Then in 1947, at a meeting at the club, it was decided to establish a zoological society. At that meeting, some of the people who were there included C.L. Williams, Andrew Carr, who was for many years the secretary, Ludolf Wikind, Captain Alex Mendez, and others. 5 years later, in 1952, on the 8th of November 1952, the then governor of Trinidad and Tobago, Sir Hubert Rance, officially opened the Emperor Valley Zoo. Now, in 1963, a man called Arturo Otero reported to the postal services and to the customs the loss of 2 rolls of Kodachrome 8mm mover film, which he had sent for processing in the United Kingdom. Well, in those days, amateur and home movies were made using 8mm film and an 8mm camera. So, what was on this film? What was used to film? Well, Arturo Otero said that the film had been used to film the shooting of sharks with harpoon guns. The carapaces of slaughtered leatherback turtles had been pushed out to sea at Matura Beach. One of those persons to whom the report was made was the Honorary Secretary of the Field Naturalist Club, yours truly, who reported to the club what had been told to him by Otero at the next monthly meeting at the club. So this was killing leatherback turtles and killing sharks. We had never heard about this. We were totally unaware of this up to that time. So the club decided to investigate. And the next year, 1964, a few people went and visited the beach and saw in the daylight and saw evidence of turtle nesting and of several decomposing carcasses on the beach. So the club decided that it would initiate turtle watching programs. We will go looking for turtles at night. And this began in 1965. We appointed Peter Bacon of the UWI, a member of the club. We appointed him as the coordinator of our turtle project. Our first night visit to the beach was, I would say, abortive, because we had a large crowd. Many of them were students from UE, but we couldn't find our way to the beach because we hadn't reconnoitered the route properly in daylight. So we couldn't find our way to the beach. Anyhow, on the way out, we met a villager and we told him of our plight, and he suggested that the few of us stragglers who were left back, that we could go higher up on the beach, and there was an opening where we would be able to get to the beach. And that's a place called Rincon. That's the name we found out it was called. And we went down there, and we were fortunate to see our first leatherback turtle. It didn't nest, but it came out of the water and went back. So from 1965, we organized our trips to different beaches, in not only to Matura, but also to Las Cuevas and Maracas. In 1966, through a member who came to establish a paint factory, Englishman who joined the club. He had come to set up a paint factory in Trinidad, and he had worked in Malaysia. He told us about the turtle project in Malaysia. At that time, at a beach called Terengganu Beach in Malaysia, it was the home to the largest congregation of leatherback turtles anywhere in the world. It's very difficult to count turtles because they come up more than once in a season, 4, 5, 6 times in a season. So when you see a turtle, you don't know whether it was there before or so. So when you see estimates for turtles, you know, it's usually 50 times between the lowest count and the highest count, because it's difficult to count turtles or turtle nests, because it's very, very difficult. So anyhow, we got in touch with a Dr. Hendrickson, a professor at the University of Malaya, who had been the leader of the turtle project. And it included a turtle hatchery operated in conjunction with the government of Malaysia. In 1966, the club's annual program of activities were prepared. The first time the club prepared an annual program of activities was in 1966. And then in 1970, we received tagging materials from the then foremost turtle researcher, Dr. Peter Pritchard of the University of Florida in Gainesville, Florida. He sent us tagging equipment and numbered metal tags and the applicator pliers to apply the tags. So the tags were numbered from number 1. It was a metal called Monel metal. It was resistant to seawater. And that was what was used in the United States and elsewhere, the tag turtles. In 1970, you will recall that we had a state of emergency in Trinidad. Black Power business. From the 21st of April until the 20th of November, we had a curfew hours at night time. So the club made a request to Commissioner of Police Bernard to give us permission to travel during the curfew hours. And he gave us a limited number of special passes so that we could travel to Matura and elsewhere. Remember, most of our members were from the west, Port of Spain and Diego Martin and so on. So he was kind enough to give us passes to travel at night. The club's tagging project commenced in 1970, and the first leatherback turtle to be tagged in Trinidad was tagged by Peter Bacon on one of our trips to Matura on the 11th of May 1970. First turtle tagged in Trinidad, 11th May 1970, by Peter Bacon, the coordinator of the turtle project. The tag number used was number 2. I don't know whatever became a number 1, but tag number 2 was used by Peter to tag the first ever turtle. In 1973, after some years, the club prepared a report entitled Sea Turtle Resources of Trinidad and Tobago, with recommendations for amendments to the then existing conservation of sea turtle laws. This was prepared by Peter Bacon and submitted to the Minister of Agriculture, Lands and Fisheries for the ministry's consideration. Minister was Lionel Robinson. Then in 1973, June 1973, the club's first quarterly bulletin, which we have become accustomed to, was prepared by Mrs. Kate Gibbs. Kate Gibbs, an English school teacher who came to Trinidad, accompanied her husband who came to work at UWI. His specialty was on pesticides, and he did a lot of examinations of things like fishes and so, marine fishes, to test for their content of pesticides. Also in 1973, the first ever protest against the environment, abuse of the environment, to be held in Trinidad and Tobago. The club, the Philanthropist Club, was in the vanguard of the protests against the use of drain number 9 in the Caroni swamp for the transportation of LPG gas from the refinery at Point-a-Pier to the LPG bottling plant on the Princess Margaret Highway, using a barge called the Pelican. The Pelican was owned by Shell Oil Company. And this was the first ever protest against the abuse of the environment. The government took action Wait, I should tell you, this protest we distributed pamphlets throughout Port of Spain and San Fernando calling on the public to stop buying shell products. It was a big protest, first ever. And the government obtained the services of a Dr. Edward Toll, Towle, to adjudicate. Dr. Toll was the head of the College of the Virgin Islands in the US Virgin Islands. And he recommended that the barge pelican be withdrawn from the swamp. The Shell had to accept the decision, and they promised us that they would construct a bottling facility on their premises at Sealots. It took 4.5 years to do. In the meanwhile, they resorted to transporting their cylinders of gas by road, as they had done previously. And on the 22nd of December 1977, 4.5 years later, we were happy to be present when the facility at Sealots, the bottling facility at Sealots, was officially opened. The name of the protest was the Blue River Protest, and the name of the group protesting, which comprised all the then environmental groups, with the Philanthropist Club in its forefront, and also the barge operators, Nanan and Ramsahai and so, who operated their boats in the Carr Swamp. Also in 1974, the name of the Trinidad Philanthropist Club was changed to include Tobago. So we became Trinidad and Tobago Philanthropist Club in 1974. Our turtle tagging continued on the beaches. And in 1975, we began visiting the Grand Tacarib Beach during the turtle tagging season. And on the first night of our visit, the Grand Tacarib, David Rooks and I tagged 18 leatherback turtles, 18. It has the largest number of tags of turtles ever tagged by the club in one night. There were more than 18 leatherback turtles visiting, but the two of us were unable to tag more than 18. The others returned to the sea after laying. My daughter, who is here, told me she was present.
23.
She said she was present with us.
There were 23 turtles.
She said the total number of turtles that came up was 23, but we tagged 18. In 1975, the turtle and turtle eggs regulations were amended by Government Notice 119 of 1775. And this new laws included all of the club's recommendations. The most significant amendment was the extension of the closed season from March 1st to 30th September. Previously, it had been from the 1st of May to 30th September. But we had found that the turtles were coming up earlier than the 1st of April, the 1st of May, and we recommended from 1st of March. I note that this year at Grand Riviere, which in those days only accommodated a few turtles. In the 70s, there were only a few turtles nesting at Grand Riviere. I note that this year that there were turtles at Grand Riviere as early as January. In 1977, the first leatherback turtle, on the 8th of September 1977, the first leatherback turtle was tagged by the club on 8 September 77 at Grand Corland Bay, which is popularly called Turtle Beach. 8 September 77. In 78, there was, in 970, there were 140 members on our roll. But there was a growth of our membership. And in 1978, this number had increased to 409 members. There were 409 members. All of them were not financial, but there were we had to send out 409 notices to meetings. And those notices, after being done by photocopies, were addressed by hand. So you could imagine the big job for the secretary and assistant secretary. And usually we had the assistance of 1 or 2 other volunteers. But 400 addressed by hand. Most of these new members were junior members. And I'm happy to note that many of these junior members eventually became scientists. After graduating from UE and elsewhere, they became scientists in the natural history matters, in the life sciences. Some of them are members of the club today. In 1989, the club was a founding member of the Council of Presidents of the Environment. It's worthy to note that nature seekers, the Turtle Conservation Group at Matura, was formed in 1990, which is 20 years after the club had started our programs. In 2000, SOS, Save Our Sea Turtles, the Turtle Conservation Group in Tobago was established in 2000. In 2006, the Turtle Trust was started in 2006. This group comprised the Nature Seekers of Matura, the Fish and Pond Conservation Group, the Grand Riviere Nature Tour Guidance Association, SOS Tobago, and BHP Trinidad and Tobago Limited. BHP there. But what is interesting here is that in speaking to one of the main members of the Turtle Trust, they had never heard about the Field Naturalist Club and its turtle tagging arrangements over 20 years before. So that was what I had sent to the president and secretary earlier. But since that time, I have drawn up a list of other organizations of importance which should be recorded. These include the UE, University of West Indies, its Department of Natural Sciences, the UTT, the Institute of Marine Affairs. So let's go from there. In August 1921, the Imperial College of Tropical Agriculture, which in 1960 was transformed into the Faculty of Agriculture of the UE at St. Augustine. In 1954, ECIAF, or the Eastern Caribbean Institute of Agriculture and Forestry, was established. ECIAF merged in 2006 with UTT, University of Trinidad and Tobago. As previously stated, in 1952, the Emperor Zoo was established. In 1971, an environmental group called CAPE, the Conservation, Appreciation, and Preservation of the Environment, Society for the Conservation, Appreciation, and Preservation of the Environment, SCAPE, was founded by an environmental engineer named Ronald Williams, not the Chinese chopper, the politician. This was an environmental engineer called Ronald Williams. And his assistant was Danny Jeffrey, very energetic in organizing the group. But unfortunately, they were very short-lived. They didn't last for very long. Then in 1985, Citizens for Conservation was established. Citizens Conservation was not a natural history group, but I thought I would include it here because they were very vibrant. They were more concerned with the preservation of the built environment, like old buildings and historical sites and so on, but I included them here. Then in 1989, a breakaway group from our club, founded by Eden Shand, who died recently, and Sylvia Casal, who also died in recent years. They established the Caribbean Forest Conservation Association in 1989. They did so at a meeting of the club. In 1987, the club was a foundation member of the Presidents for the Environment. And in 1991, the National Trust was established. National Trust of Trinidad and Tobago. It is good to note here that the National Trust was established 50 years, 50 years after the first meeting in 1941 was held at the Royal Victoria Institute to discuss the formation of a national trust. Captain Alex Rendez was the club's representative of that meeting. In 1990, as I said previously, Nature Seekers, a community group at Matura Village, was established for turtle conservation. They, as you know, are still in existence. In 1990 also, the Manatee Conservation Trust was established to conserve and to study our manatees in the Nene River Swamp. In 1995, the Environmental Management Authority was established at Chagaramas. I had the privilege of being the club's representative on the Environmental Management Authority when it began in 1995. I served a term. In 1996, Environment Tobago was established by Mrs. Pat Turpin and a former president of the Trinidad Free Naturalist Club, David Rooks. David Rooks and Pat Turpin were the founders of Environment Tobago in 1996. Also in 1996 was the establishment of Fishermen and Friends of the Sea. You remember Gary Aboud? Fishermen and Friends of the Sea. Very active group up to last year. I don't know what has happened, but I would say, in my opinion, they are very mute these days. But they did a very good job in bringing the problems of fishing and trawling and destruction of the seabed by trawlers to the attention of the public. No government action though. No government action taken. And by the way, the laws governing fisheries was established in 1916, over 100 years ago. But it has had amendments. Then in 2002, as previously said, SOS Tobago, for the preservation of turtles in Tobago. Notice I'm using the word preservation. In some countries in the world, they don't have conservation societies. Like in India, it's the preservation of wildlife, in laws in India and in some of the other countries in the East. In 2071, as recent as 2017, sorry, 2017, Minister, I might have that date incorrect. The Ministry of Environment and Water Resources, sorry, it's 2011. 2011. The Ministry for the Environment and Water Resources was established. And the first minister was the Honorable Ramona Ramchand, who was made the Minister of State with the responsibilities for the environment and water resources. And today the present Minister for the Environment is the Honorable Penelope Beckles. In 2006, Turtle Village Trust was established, as I previously said, and in 2012, Papa Bois Conservation Organization in Trinidad and Tobago was established. I'll pause for a little while. Are there any questions?
And if anybody has questions or comments, you can just raise your hand.
No questions?
No, you could proceed. Ian, you're muted now.
Chris, I think Jal has a question.
Okay, Jal, go ahead.
Greetings, Ian. How are you?
Right. Okay.
Thank you. Good seeing you. I have a question regards to, what was the team how often you all went out when you were doing the tagging project?
Okay, well, remember, we were all working people. I noticed Malaganes is listening. We went to the beach at Matura mainly on weekends. Friday nights, Saturday nights, we overnighted at Grand Riviere at Grand Tacarib, courtesy of Mr. Etienne Malayani, who owned the estate there, and he had his caretaker there, and he had a house there. So he was kind enough to give us accommodation. But sometimes we had large groups, you know, like 20 or more people. Sometimes we split up into two groups or split up into smaller groups. And one occasion, we had a very brave member, can't remember, Ishmael Samad. Ishmael Samad confronted hunters, illegal people killing turtles. Ishmael Samad confronted them with their cutlasses and so on. He was an amazing guy. He's still around. I think he runs a bookshop sort of at Manzanilla Beach or something. I've seen something on the Facebook about that. Any other questions about?
Did you all do any research on the south coast of Trinidad?
No,
Thank
we
you.
never did. Peter may have gone, because Peter Bacon, he visited, I know he visited fish markets to check on their catches of turtles. He did a very good job, and we published our work in international turtle magazines. So I'm always surprised that people like Dr. Eckert and so on, who now doing research in Trinidad, have excluded from all their writings, have excluded the activities of the Trinidad Philanthropist Club. It amazes me. And similarly, that the people who established the Turtle Trust had never heard of the Philanthropist Club's activities, which had taken place 20 years ago. During our turtle tagging project, we tagged 330 turtles, 330 leatherbacks. We did come across other turtles occasionally, but none of them were tagged. We didn't have the turtle equipment at that time. It was, in my opinion, one of our most successful and membership participating activities which we ever had. It's all recorded in our journals. Any other questions on what went on before? So it's so much that I had to edit what I was writing. The club, now let me just come to some of my wishes for the future for the club. First and foremost, that the club would acquire a home. I mean, 131 years and no home. Whereas many organizations always think of the Horticulture Club and their lovely building. They came more than 50 years after us and they have a home. And other organizations have come up and had homes. And we don't have one as yet. Also, I have written to our president suggesting that we consider a South Trinidad branch to accommodate our members and persons interested who reside in Central and South Trinidad. This, my suggestion is that this organization, if it comes to being, would have its own management committee. So our management committee will leave it up to them. Of course, we will give them all the assistance in establishing and give them all assistance from time to time as necessary. Now, more immediate is my persistent suggestion that we be able to encourage bird watchers in the South and in Central to participate in a South Trinidad Christmas bird count in 2022. Now, I'm glad to see that our birding group went to the swamps and Fullerton and Cedars and Icarcus and did some bird watching. There are species of birds down there that don't occur up north. You know, so it would be a good thing if Trinidad and Tobago has a second bird count in South Trinidad. I've supplied the contact number for establishment, how to establish, what to do. Vishnu Devi, I have supplied his name on Facebook. Vishnu Devi 45 at gmail.com. Vishnu, V-I-S-H, Vish 45 at gmail.com is his contact email. And he would assist members in South and Central who wish to have a bird count in 2022 and beyond. Then, you know, I'm very concerned, and whereas I might have been doing things a bit conservatively, I am now posting on a regular basis my concerns of the inaction by the wildlife section and by the Wildlife Conservation Committee. Maybe they are working, but they are not giving the public any information. We want information. We want information relative to the status of our wildlife. Every year we have a hunting season for a long 5 months. 5 months is longer, 151 days and 152 days in a leap year. When there are many, the hunting season in many states in the United States, the big United States, with with 20 million whitetail there, the hunting season is less than 100 days. The average hunting season for whitetail there, I'm not talking about other animals. Whitetail there is the average is between 60 and 100 days for hunting with shotguns. There is hunting with bows and arrows and so on. But I'm thinking of shotguns because that's what the majority of hunters in Trinidad use. It's less than 100 days. Do you know that there are areas in some states that have a hunting season for a week? 1 week, 7 days. In tiny, puny Trinidad, our hunting season is 150 days. That's what we call in conservation. In addition, we are not supplied with information as to how many state game licenses, hunting permits are issued every year. That should be made public. We do not know how many animals, game animals, each species, deer, tattoo, lap, quank, and so on. How many of each species was killed in the previous season? Now that information is supplied by the hunters on the application forms for a new license. So it's only a matter of adding. The people in the wildlife section can add. It's only a matter of addition and giving the information to the public. It would also tell us, the information should also include how many licenses are issued, so we know how much hunters out there, whether it's 12,000, 15,000. The last figure I had was 12,000. Now, I must remind members that the amount of animals, the game animals that were killed in the seasons of 2010, 11, and 12 were made public by the initiative of the then Minister of Agriculture, Lands and Fisheries, the Honorable Ganga Singh. He wanted to have the ban on hunting, and he got the ministry, the wildlife section, to make public how many game animals were killed in the previous 3 years. A phenomenal amount for a small country like Trinidad, and we're talking about conservation. Our emphasis must be on the preservation of our wildlife rather than sustainable use or sustainable hunting and putting them in the pot. We must know or have an idea of the average amount of wildlife or game animals that are left. Now, during their ban on hunting, it was proposed to have a census. I think that some work was done by Dr. Divatai of the university. He may be still continuing his work, but we want information. We want to know what's going on. Now, finally, when we talk about wildlife, the first thing we think of is the game animals. But wildlife is much more than that. Wildlife even includes our forests. But we need information. We need better laws for the conservation of our fisheries. Our crabs, lobsters, queen conch, cascadoo, crayfish, and such, black conch, black freshwater conch. We need to have legislation, specific legislation for each species of our fisheries. You would be amazed to know how many lobsters are captured in Central American countries. Thousands of tons of lobsters, because they have conservation programs. In Trinidad and Tobago, we are no closed season. You're taking crab and put it in your callaloo every Sunday. There's no closed season for crabs. There's no closed season for lobsters. And then the methods of capture. No closed season, no bag limits. You could catch as much crab and as much lobster you want every day. There are no closed season for queen conchs. You know, we need laws for all these fishery, which are important food sources. We need to preserve them.
Okay. So good evening, everyone. My name is Christy Carr. So today I thought I would do an introduction into plate tectonics. So I did my degree in petroleum geoscience. So I'm very knowledgeable of a lot of earth science topics, and I thought that this would be very interesting to go through. So 1 second. Okay. So I thought I'll start with a structure of the Earth page just to give everyone an idea of what I'm talking about. So the Earth, it has a couple layers. So each layer has a unique chemical composition and a unique physical state, and it can actually impact the life on the Earth's surface. So the core is very hot. So that is, you'll see in my pointer.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So the core is very hot. It's over 5,000 degrees Celsius. And this heat actually radiates from the core upwards to the crust that we would live on. And this heat can actually trigger plates to move and shift. And that can result in how we get earthquakes and how we get eruptions from volcanoes. And of course, these hazards could then impact our life. So now I'll go into what plate tectonics are. So the idea of plate tectonics is that the Earth's outermost layer is made up of large moving pieces of plates, and all of the Earth's land and water, they sit on these plates. So the plates themselves, they are made of solid rock, and under the plates are a weaker layer of partially melted rock. This would be closer to the mantle layer, which is the second layer. And because of this heat, it will constantly move the plates. So kind of like how you would boil water and it will eventually get bubbles and start to move around. It's the same as if you have plates floating on that water. So that convection would start movement, and that's how we get a lot of our earthquakes. So in terms of plates and the types of plates, so we have three main types. We have the convergent plate boundary. So that's where two plates meet. That's called a boundary. And the convergent plate boundary is where two plates would collide. So imagine like two pieces of rock coming together. When they touch and meet, they can either go upwards or they can go one under the other. So this is how we get a lot of our large mountain ranges being formed. And also if the rock happens to collide and slide under one another, just like in this picture here, this is actually how we get a lot of the volcanoes in the Caribbean region. So that's called a subduction zone. Trinidad is not part of that. That's why we don't have volcanoes, only mud volcanoes. But this actually caused a lot of the islands to have volcanoes. And then we have a divergent plate boundary. This is where two plates would move away from each other. So this is where the earth would actually rip open and tear. And when this happens, we get a lot of trenches being formed, like deep ocean trenches, as well as volcanoes, because once you have that rip, you would have magma and lava being flowing upwards, and that's how you get some volcanoes being formed. And of course, we have lastly the transform plate boundary. This is where two plates would slide past each other. Now in Trinidad, we have a lot of faults, which is similar to this setting of a transform plate boundary, and that's how come we get a lot of earthquakes. So today we had an earthquake, and that is possibly due to something similar to this with those plates moving past each other, and that's how we get well, we feel that as earthquakes. So the last thing I want to talk about is the link to plate tectonics and continental drift. So in the 1800s, a man called Alfred Wegener, he proposed the idea of continental drift. And he sat down one day, and he's a German, and he thought that the modern day countries that we see, they kind of look like a puzzle and they look like they fit together. So he came up with the idea that perhaps they were all joined together, and he thought of the idea that they were part of a supercontinent, and he called it Pangea. So his idea was that over time they split apart, and that's how we get the modern day layout of the continents. And then later on, researchers, they discovered that this was actually possible, and it was caused by plate movements. So the last thing I'll show is just a short video on how that exactly happened, so you can get an idea of how Pangea split. and how we got the layout of the earth that we have today. One second.
In this program, we're going to learn about Pangaea. What is Pangaea? Pangaea was a supercontinent that existed over 250 million years ago. Today, the Earth is made up of 7 continents. A continent is a large landmass found on Earth. On a map, you can easily find the continents of Antarctica, Australia, Asia, Europe, Africa, South America, and North America. Scientists believe that at one time, all the land on Earth was joined together as one big landmass, the continent of Pangaea. Pangaea is an ancient Greek word that means all lands. During the Jurassic period, the time of Allosaurus and other dinosaurs, Pangaea started to break up. The process of breaking up is called rifting. The continents reached their current location and arrangement about 35 million years ago. Continents continue to drift today.
Yeah, so that is all for my presentation. Very short, very simple. Hopefully it was a little different and you all enjoyed it.
Okay, slideshow. All right. Good evening, everyone. Happy anniversary. I'm Rheanna. I'm a new member to the club. I'm talking about tropical floriculture through sacred ecology and regenerative design. This is a mural from a Jew. Now it's all that cocoa bell chocolate. You can see a peace lily there, but also if you look closely, you can see pollinators like the hummingbirds and the butterflies, the monstera. And so it's a holistic approach beyond just flowers that people think of, and that inspired my journey. My background is in earth sciences, so like Christine, and then I went to pursue a bachelor's in international agriculture development. Then I did my master's in gastronomy and rural food cultures in Italy, and now I'm currently based at a Jupa on a 4.5-acre botanic garden. I'm very excited to be here. What sparked my love of flowers? My mum passed away from cancer when I was just 4 years old. She pursued botany. So I always feel like the love of the living world and all the flowers came from her. And I've recently been experimenting with partners like Wasamaki and other flower farmers to provide local flowers on days like Valentine's, Easter, Mother's Day, etc. And it's been going really well. So I wanted to understand the cultural aspect of botany, but also the industry in culture. In January of this year, I applied for a grant by Christine Gale. She's the author of this book, Cultivated. Didn't think I had a chance. I literally just came out of hiking by Petit and Grand Tacarib for 6 days. I just had an hour and a half until the deadline, and I applied. And out of 39 applications and 12 countries, I came second. And so I got a fully funded trip to Hawaii to pursue this interest of mine. So that included airfare and accommodation. And just like Jesus spent 40 days in a desert, I chose to spend in Hawaii. For those of you who don't know, this is a map here. I visited 4 islands, beginning in Maui, and then to Kauai, then to Oahu and Big Island. What's unique about Hawaii, why did I choose the Pacific? It's the most isolated populated landmass in the world. 2,000 miles from the US, 4,000 miles from Japan. It has 10 of the world's 14 climate zones, so it's the most concentrated out of any landmass in the world, with only over 1 million people. And it's home to hundreds of endemic plant and animal species. And one of the biggest issues being a third of the 1,300 native plants listed are already threatened or endangered. But as some of you might know, in popular culture, flowers are a huge symbol in Hawaiian culture. You might have seen the film Moana. You might have seen a lot of things on the television or in music, and flowers are also a multi-million-dollar industry. There are bird watchers in this group, so I just wanted to show you three that might like this. So this is the nene goose, which is Hawaii's state bird. What's unique about this bird, it can fly. Then there's the iwi, also known as the scarlet honey creeper, absolutely gorgeous, similar to our scarlet ibis. There's the eo, which is the only Hawaiian hawk. And again, Hawaii is very recent. It's a lava based island, and it's still growing, Big Island being the most new island forming. We just talked about tectonics, and then Kauai being the first island in the archipelago. So a lot of all the different species are endemic just to this part of the world. So May 9th to June 17th, this is just over 3 weeks ago, I went and I pursued this cultivated grant. I had 5 goals. It was a participatory approach. I wanted to learn the Hawaiian language, learn about native plants, visit botanic gardens and meet florists and flower farmers, understand what regenerative design and tropical floriculture actually meant, to continue to study botany and tropical flowers. So these are 3 I just want to show you. One was a protea, which is more native to South Africa and Australia. As I talked about microclimates, these are some flowers that I've never seen in my life. Then this is a crown flower, which is one of the queen of Hawaii's favorite flowers. It's really beautiful in a lei. And then I always collected and pressed flowers along the way. This is an alpaca in the Goodeniaceae family, and I'll talk more about the myths shortly. So there are 2 aspects of when I studied floriculture in Hawaii. One was culture and the other was industry. So beginning with culture, one of my dreams that came true is I got to visit the National Tropical Botanic Gardens. This is in Kauai, which is known as the Garden Island. This is the Mahuli Gardens, which is over 100, actually that should be 1,000 acres. And there's a concept in the culture called Malama Aina, caring and honoring the land. So this is Uncle Moku, who's one of the few indigenous Hawaiians who is still left on the property. And he shared with me a lot about the ahupua system. In Hawaii, one of the spots here, the way that they organized their land was from the mountain to the sea. So there was a huge interconnection between the way that they preserved, they looked after the plants, looked after the animals, and were able to feed their own people. Studies prove that it was actually very abundant before the Americans came in. And so there was a lot of harmony that went into play. One of the focuses here at Limahuli is on environmental conservation. A lot of scientists go in via helicopters to some of the natural reserve to actually study lost plants, endangered species, and to try to have that scientific research. These are 3 of my favorite flowers. On the left, the red one is the Ohia Lehua in the Myrtaceae family, which is a bright red. They say when it blooms, it's going to rain. Then this is the Naupaka again from the pressed flower I had in the earlier slides. This one grows along the beach. And then the third one, which looks like a hibiscus. This is one I picked at a jupa. This is a white variety, the Waimea. The subspecies and they're absolutely gorgeous too. Again, there are thousands of species. I can't do it in a short time, but I just want you to see some of the varieties. Another part of the culture is the ceremony. So ohi means to gather. And this is quite common in the culture where the more aloha or respect and love you have for a person, you would gather these flowers and have the tradition to make these leis. I got to participate in one of these ceremonies called May Day at an elementary school, where I actually helped to make the backdrop that you see here with the heliconia rostractas. And this is, again, a community event where everyone gathered flowers from their backyards, from gardens. It was like thousands of flowers, the biggest setup I've ever seen, and then they were able to dance. Each of the colors that the kids are wearing here represents a different flower of the different islands. Again, working with the schools, I was really touched by the education and the keiki. So I got to work with some nonprofits like Kukua Foundation and Institute of Marine Biology in Oahu, where again, a lot of my interviews that I did were based on work days and some of youth internships. The one lady with the 2 kids there told me she wears flowers just like she wears makeup. The guy in the top, he's rated as one of the world's top 100 ecologists. And he is pretty fantastic, where he's been working a lot with the sovereignty and how to engage community leaders in a lot of the research. And again, the Aina land in school. So again, how do you teach the younger generation about the biodiversity there? On the right, there are 2 examples. One where you see moons. This is the actual learning tool where you hold it up against the moon phase. Right now we're in a full moon, and the kids are able to identify which part of the moon cycle, what part of the planting phase is there. And at the bottom, it's called a kilo journal that they're making, and kilo translates to observance. So again, using our senses from a young age to observe our natural environment and then to come together These circles that you see with the groups of people, they always ask for the ancestors' knowledge before they gather. They chant through song. And what you all might know as the cordyline plants in Trinidad, they call it tea plants, and we were planted here in this circle for extra protection. You see flowers infused in art, dance, and mo'olero, which is stories, myths, and legends. So this is an example of a hula, to a specific type of flower in green on the left. Then the middle is a naupaka again. There's a mountain variety and there's a sea variety. And the myths and legends say that it was once a princess who fell in love with a fisherman. And because, again, the taboo of different classes, they were never able to be together. And the gods and the goddesses converted them, one into a flower species that just grows by the sea, which I showed you, and then one that is in the mountain. And then on the other side, the flower farm itself, of an older generation preserving the culture of lay gathering flowers, the ohi, especially in a time of global trade, especially with cheap flowers from Thailand and the Philippines. On the markets and roadsides, so in my travels, I hiked tens, what felt like thousands of miles in my trip. On the road to Hana, you would see these different booths on a trust basis, where you could actually have flowers that you would put in money. These are all from people's backyards. You would go to a farmer's market and there'd be flowers everywhere. This is the lady with the plumeria flower. Even though it's not native to Hawaii, again, there's the fragrance of flowers that fill the air. People who, you know, everywhere you go in Hawaii, it's just in part of the everyday culture, which I love. Some of these you recognize here in Trinidad, and then there are other varieties that I've never seen before. But then that raises the question, what do you do when flowers are infused in your daily life? And there's a whole industry, as I talked about, it's a multi-million-dollar industry, where even though there's brain drain similar to Trinidad, people want convenience, and that's where floral shops come in. This is an example here. Grace Flowers is the largest floral boutique in Big Island, and she's teaching the demonstration lei. So there are all sorts of different forms of making lei, which is passed down from one elder to the next. She's showing the kui, which is the one around as a necklace, which you actually use a giant needle. And plumerias, you might see a little bit of jade vine there as well. We actually use dendrobiums too, and it was quite lovely. You can use some of the bougainvillea. They don't last very long. The haku lei is a type of 3, which goes around the head, and the willy willy is a type of braided. So it's a lot of technical handwork. Again, there's a lot of research and development, so we're going out as the industry. Hawaii actually leads the world, in addition to the Netherlands, with anthurium varieties. Here in Trinidad, you might know in La Vega, where they bring in from the Netherlands, but actually in Hawaii, they have a strong research partnership with the University of Manoa on the next island. So one of my favorite varieties is kind of this, they call it the lady kit, the lipstick shade, but it actually has little speckles of crimson red inside of those anthuriums right by the statics. This is the Tanui family. They're 3rd generation, and they're continuing the family run farm. As you would know, just like agricultural farming, the amount of farm dwindling over the years. So it's really exciting to see kind of, you know, how do you keep the industry going, keep it exciting and sexy, and the need to have the young people with different ideas and new varieties that are being developed in the labs, in the greenhouses. This was one of my favorite orchid farms that I went to. Hawaii is the orchid capital of the world, competing with Singapore. Yes, in the middle, as you can see, this orchid is worth $20,000. I don't know who puts the price on orchids, just like in the art world, but this is really special to meet the father and the son, the Akatsuka family, who is from Japan originally. They had natural disasters of a lava eruption, but again, they adapt and they pivoted with e-commerce to be able to export their orchids not only through the different Hawaiian islands, but also to the rest of mainland USA. There's a culture of boutiques that you don't only want to just sell flowers. Yes, you can get the pay price, but now there's a lot of originality with having ceramic vases, to have educational resources, to have different merchandise. So this is one of my favorite examples of how you diversify those income streams. And then again, Hawaii, like the Caribbean, being a top tourist destination, signature events and weddings are huge industries. I met a florist who will never do a wedding or an event that goes below 10,000 US. So that's her minimum price. So again, it is a very lucrative industry. These are examples of how they weaved orchids with the birds of paradise here, with some papyrus. Then the monstera, when you actually do installations too, you can be really creative as like living installments. And then this is another example of when you do farm to table events to incorporate local flowers into the event. So just as a cap up, as I wrap up, Hawaii has numerous challenges. Again, being part of USA, sovereignty is the #1 thing that they want. There's a lot of inequality in housing, food insecurity, environmental degradation. And again, with millionaires and artists all coming in and buying property, a lot of local Hawaiians are being pushed off of their land. This is an example of a writer, Keone. I can share later on that you can keep up, but similar to the Caribbean, Hawaii has its own challenges it has to face. But what are my key takeaways for our own island? Why did I go there to come back? Because I think that our own local floriculture industry, there's huge potential here in the millions of dollars. So #1, to respect and learn from elders. They call it the kapunas. I think we have a lot to learn from the older generation here, especially in Field Naturalist Society. 2, how can we have a more regenerative approach? Trinidad being an oil and gas industry that's very extractive, take. How can we put back into the land as much as we're taking away to have more reciprocity? 3, the need for research for conserving endangered species. So again, that comes into partnerships with the university, having more public investment from our government to recognize the value. #4, educating the younger generation and the wider public to the importance of our biodiversity. As I would have showed this previous slide, having young people engaged to be able to identify what's happening, to observe the natural environment, the moon cycles, to name the flowers, the language, all of that is important that we also can do here. To have diversified approaches of floriculture, cut flowers, botanical gardens, workshops, events, that just like agriculture, this is a cash crop that can be pursued even further to be more creative and innovative. There could be greater collaboration among local and regional backyard growers and South farmers, also among the English-speaking islands and CARICOM. And then #7, finding the balance between culture and industry. You know, we also have our own culture here in Trinidad, even though an indigenous culture might not be as strong as in Hawaii, but we have a variety of ethnicities and nationalities who all appreciate flowers in different ways, and we can continue to build it with enterprise. So this is my favorite flower from the trip. Again, I talked about microclimates. This is something we don't have in Trinidad, but this is 10,000 feet up, freezing cold. I am freezing in this photo, and this is a silver sword belonging to the Asteraceae family. It also is called a hina, which means very gray in Hawaiian, but you can see what the leaves actually look like, and it's this beautiful flower that just goes up, almost the way that the agave family with its own flower shoots up. Almost looks like Brussels sprouts if anyone has seen that growing. And that's it. I went a little bit over time, but this is one of my favorite murals that I saw. Again, this is the Elsa with one of the leis of the local flowers, and then this is the keiki, the kid, the younger generation, holding the water, because again, Malama Aina in Hawaii means to care for the land. And when I spoke to Uncle Moku, it's not just about the land where you live or your community, it's the whole island. So challenging us as an individual, as a community, as a field naturalist society, of how can we preserve the next kind of generation, the next 100 years for 7 generations later on. So mahalo nui, thank you everyone for listening. And if you have questions, I don't know if we have time.
What I have is very small, very brief. I'm going to talk first, and then I'm going to show a very short video. Hopefully it'll work. And it's about doves. We have a lot of ruddy ground doves in our yard. And well, generally, to me, the dove represents peace, a peaceful kind of bird. I was amazed when I observed them a lot, because they come to my bird table for rice that I put up. And they are extremely aggressive. Mainly among themselves, what they do is they raise their wings very aggressively, like this. And they push each other off the table. Now, to this table, one other species comes regularly, and that is the shiny cowbird. The shiny cowbird does not like the wings raised at all, and generally stays on the side, on the edge of the table, and makes a little bite movement sometimes, but generally does not stay long and flies off to come back, flies off to come back. The kiskadee comes occasionally, does not like the wing movement either, does not stay long. And the dove, the white-tipped dove, you know, he's so different from the ruddy ground dove. He's very stately, he's much bigger, about 3 times as large, and he comes occasionally, but he never stays. Because as soon as they start this thing with the wings, he's gone. That's it. He ain't bother. He doesn't make an effort. He doesn't raise to do the beak thing that the shiny cowbird does. He does nothing. He just leaves. I don't have a video of him because he doesn't stay long. I never have the camera with me when he comes. But I will show you now this, hopefully, the little film that I made. So I'm going to share my screen. Sometimes there's one solitary ground dove on the table and he gets rid of everybody. He just parades up and down, taking the seeds and doesn't allow anybody on it at all. The shiny cowbirds go and come. They retreat and they come back. And when there's a number of them, they feel better. That's it.
Great. Put it on full view. Thank you. So welcome everybody and thanks very much. I think I'd like to thank all the presenters who presented before me. I'm just going to do a quick presentation about a very interesting topic that we are involved in now, especially in this world of monkeypox and dengue fever, malaria, and yellow fever, and so forth. When you need into traveling, is the whole presence of monkeys, of primates, which are I'm talking about non-human primates that we have in Trinidad and Tobago, and what we know about them, and the application for knowing where they are, where they occur, to our environmental and natural resource management, especially if you want to move forward in protected area planning, which we don't have. We're one of the only countries in this hemisphere that does not have a national park system. We have for reserves, etc., and wildlife sanctuaries, but we don't have big blocks of area that is managed actively 24 hours by management agency. Regards to conservation management, we are now making monkeys environmentally sensitive species. They are protected under the Wildlife Act, but now they want to make them environmentally sensitive species under the EMA Act, and hopefully we have what is called species recovery, trying to develop ecological environments so their populations can grow. And lastly, public health. We're all concerned about monkeypox and yellow fever outbreaks. So it's good to know where our monkeys are and the risks that they can transfer to us. A bit about myself. I have a master's in engineering in urban and regional planning. So I apply it in environmental management planning, and my BSc is in environmental and natural resource management. So I'm a scientist, a biological scientist, and I worked in wildlife management, etc. And I also worked in international relations. So next slide. So what is the idea is that we are going to look at, next slide, Chris, you could switch, that we talk about primates and, it's about mammals. And then we look at primates in New World and their occurrence in Trinidad and Tobago and the current distribution and what we could learn from them. Next slide. So more or less that primates have evolved over time from simple species to a complex range down to humans, a branch of primates also, but we are specifically looking at New World primates in our discussion. Next slide. So this is a order, suborder, etc., where our primates are broken up into different genera and suborders, etc. Next slide. And in our part of the world, we are looking at New World monkeys. Originally, primates pretty much started in the Old World, And look where Trinidad and Tobago is, just at the top of northern South America or Venezuela. And how did primates come to this part of the world? Did they walk across like how humans walked across, as is per se, or canoed across? Well, let's go. Next slide. New World monkeys are very unique. Next slide. And we basically have over only 5 families of New World monkeys, and these are them here on around the circle. And whereas the other parts of the world, the whole world, there are monkeys and apes, etc., and also strange creatures down in Madagascar that also occur. But we're focusing on the 5 New World monkeys, but only 2 of them occur in our area. Next slide. And how did the New World monkeys get to us? There's a theory that is standard. About a couple million years ago, they actually rafted the islands between Africa and South America, and they probably island hopped, or the giant current that circles around the Atlantic Ocean, they probably came across in giant rafts. And these old world monkeys from Africa basically sailed across or rafted across and came to the South America, and they established themselves in South America, and they moved northward into the Panama Isthmus, etc., and we get them as far as Central America. Let's go to the next slide. So we are this part of northern South America, Trinidad and Tobago, and these primates that we have in our part of the world. Next, these are the full range of monkeys that are in the New World. We have 5 main families, but you can see we have a lot of hundreds of species, over 150 plus species of primates that occur in the New World. Primarily, the heart of most primates we have is in South America and the Amazon region. Next slide. But focusing on Trinidad and Tobago is that, well, let's look at the occurrence of primates that we have. Historically, biologically, we were separate. We were joined, and literature review, what I had used, looking at both archaeological records in terms of contemporary research into primates into the Trinidad and Tobago. And also to looking at 20 years from 2000 thereabouts to now, to about 22 years of field work of going through Trinidad and Tobago and seeing what the occurrence of monkeys occur. Next slide. So this study was done by literature review and also done by field studies and by interviews of both experts and local communities. So overall, monkeys that occur in our region pretty much belong to only 2 groups in Trinidad and Tobago. Let's go. Next slide. And what is the key thing to think about is that we have howler monkeys and capuchin monkeys. Historically, what we find in the archaeological record is primarily much howler monkeys and white-fronted capuchins, which are considered indigenous to Trinidad and Tobago, a subfamily of the capuchin. But because within the recent years, we have had, and historical years more so, we have had trading of monkeys between Venezuela, South America, and Trinidad. We have a new introduction of monkeys occurring, which is the tufted capuchins and the wedge-cap capuchins. Also to regards to the pet trade, we have also to the Guyana squirrel monkeys coming in by the pet trade. But in the wild, we're seeing stable populations of howler monkeys and declining populations of capuchin monkeys, specifically white-fronted, but increasing populations of tufted monkeys, especially tufted monkey capuchins, which especially you see in Chaguaramas area, and wedge-cap capuchins, which are being released possibly from the pet trade. Next slide. So this slide shows you the pretty much occurrence of monkeys in primates in Trinidad and Tobago. So historically in the archaeological record, we have monkeys occurring, at least confirmed archaeological record of them in Tobago. There's no wild monkeys, as far as we know, in the field breeding in Tobago, but howler monkeys have been reported in the archaeological record. And we don't know if capuchins, and most of the capuchins came across with the Amerindian traffic of migration of Amerindian peoples from South America into Trinidad, etc., because they're considered companion animals, possibly as pets. But in terms of actual populations, during European contact, there were no records of large populations of any monkeys in the wild in Tobago. But in Trinidad, yes, we have active population historically in the archaeological record and in historical record of howler monkeys and capuchins. Next slide. So what's their distribution in Trinidad and Tobago? Let's go to Tobago. Next slide. So Tobago, we have reports of them in the literature, but we don't have reports of them where exactly in Tobago. So Anderson and both Stedman, they reference monkeys occurrences in Tobago. So next slide. And the literature shows that this is a map of the various watersheds in Tobago, that mostly possibility of stable population where forest ecologies are. It may not be Southwest Tobago, which is a dry environment, but mostly much the windward coast, the south side of Tobago and the north side of Tobago could be ecological areas in these watersheds where monkeys could occur. Next slide. So this is a map showing the forest types of Tobago, and where the red blocks are is where I guesstimate the ecological best zones for monkey populations historically, whereas the two to the right, pretty much in the most stable ecological zones for monkey populations in terms of the forest ecology, giving diversity of food and habitat for monkeys. But again, we don't have confirmed monkeys occurring currently in Tobago. Next slide. So what's happening in Trinidad? And let's see what where the howler monkeys are in Trinidad. And this is interactive with members that we have here. This map is showing all that red dots is where I have picked up in the last 22 years howler monkeys. And this is very interesting. A lot of people know about howler monkeys in Chaguaramas area, but do you know you could get howler monkeys extending on the southern side of the Northern Range all the way to Matura? And I've picked up them in the Maracas and Joseph watershed, the Las Cuevas watershed, the Yarra watershed, the Madamas watershed, and even also the Matura watershed. And along the south side of the island, on the east side, we have them along the coastal windward forest belt with a gap there in North Manzanilla. But you pick up howler monkeys in the Brigham Hill Central Range area, right through the Central Range in the Navet Dam area, right down in the river swamp, along the south coast, especially along the river valleys, and even on the south coast in the Trinity Hills and also the southern watershed. There's howler monkeys along the seacoast as far as Quinam, and then you have an interesting, almost isolated population of howler monkeys in the Cedrus Forest Reserve area, going as far as Labray and going as far as south in Chatham area. Next slide, that's the howler monkey distribution. So think about this overlaying about protected areas. So this slide is showing you our forest ecology and where the main concentration of howler monkeys are occurring. And you can see the Chaguaramas area is a present forested area, but you have a big gap of urbanized area between Diego Martin, Mova, Port of Spain, St. Anne's, etc. But there's a travel corridor on the south side, north side of the Northern Range along the Paramin into Maracas Bay area. Howler monkeys have been reported, and then you have howler monkeys along the northern side of the Northern Range. And you have a very sporadic population with an interesting core population in the Comaca Valley, Hollis Valley of howler monkeys. You have also in the center of the island, in the Central Range Forest, you have howler monkeys. And then you have this nervous swamp population. And then in the East Coast, you have populations going down to the Trinity Hills, South Coast, and that core population in the Cedrus area and Forest Reserve area. Look at where the forests are, where the monkeys are. And yes, you have howler monkeys occurring in these areas. A very interesting population is in the Moruga South Coast area in the Chatham, not Chatham, but more so the Rocha Douglas Forest Reserve. Next slide. So where there's forest, there's monkeys. But let's think about the white-fronted capuchin. This monkey is very, very limited in population. There's been, I can't say confirmed report of white-fronted capuchins in Chaguaramas, and something that we need to reconfirm. There has been a very weird occurrence of capuchins reported in the Comaca Valley, and I've confirmed seeing them in the Matura Valley, more so in the Rampanagas Valley. And then, of course, you have populations in the river swamp going into Beach area along the Beach Road. And then you have this Trinity Hill population. I don't know how stable the population are, but this is one of the slowest populations and the most endangered populations we have in terms of risk, both listed by the IUCN and in terms of species limited population. Next slide. So you can see the watersheds. We don't have them on the west coast, but you can see in this map where the forest areas are, where the red boxes are, is where white-fronted capuchins have been reported. If anybody has any reports in central or other areas of Trinidad, please let's contact me. Let's add to the map and develop a more detail. Or if you have confirmed sightings of capuchin monkeys in Chaguaramas, white-fronted capuchins, let's confirm this occurrence. Next slide. So let's look at the ones that have been introduced more recently, especially with the pet trade. And you can see the green marks, green dots are where the tufted capuchins, the ones that seem to be taking over Chaguaramas. seem to be moving, and they're moving eastward. They're leaving Chaguaramas, going along the northern range. They're all in Diego Martin. They're following the forest line. They're all in the back of St. Anne's. They're in Santa Cruz. They're on Maracas Bay. They go as far as Las Cuevas. They're being reported now in the northern range, as in the Yarra watershed, and also in Arima watershed. Yeah. There's a report of them in the south coast, also in the Moruga area, that little dot to the bottom, and where all 3 species of monkeys are being seen. You have the howlers, and the 3 species of capuchins reported in the Moruga area, which is part of that southern watershed forest cover. Let's go to the next slide. Let's look at the forest cover where these tufted capuchin, these are monkeys with the black band on their head, almost like a little mohawk. And you can see Chaguaramas is their big population. And then you have a small population that is seen to be increasing on the northern range. And then you have this weird little population down in Moruga that they're being sighted. And again, possibly pet trade on the south coast, release and breeding is taking place. Next slide. Let's go to the very unusual one, which is the wedge cap, which is it's a new one that's population Chaguaramas been reported. We don't know if they occur, but only reports in Chaguaramas and Moruga. I don't have occurrences in the northern range. Possibly there was an occurrence of them in the Arima Valley around Isarite. I don't know if that population is breeding, but we have it listed there. Next slide. Let's see what forest environment they occur. So you see, these monkeys are reported in the Chaguaramas area, probably as releases from the pet trade in the Arima Valley and then the south coast, which seems to be above active population. So let's learn about them a little more. In conclusion, let's close off now. Next slide. And what's happening with these monkeys and why it's important. So the discussion is, monkeys are important as a biological indicator species, especially in terms of related to human beings. Howler monkeys we have occurred throughout the northern range and also along the east coast and the south coast and then the southwest peninsula. White-fronted capuchin historically is interestingly very limited reports of them, but they do occur in the northern range. And the tufted, which is now introduced, is in the northern range and actively going eastward. Whereas the wedge cap is also breeding, and there's a weird occurrence of them on the south coast. And these monkeys, especially capuchin monkeys, are big traded in the pet trade, but also all monkeys are eaten as part of the wildlife hunting trade. And also they are also important indicator species for disease, malaria, and yellow fever as indicator species. Next slide. So in conclusion, what I want to share with the club and with members here is that we need to get reports of monkeys, so where they occur. This is the forest map of Trinidad, but do you know that we do not have national parks? There's supposed to be a big national park plan that has not been implemented in law. There's only proposed pilots, etc., or environmentally sensitive areas, but there's no staffing, full-time 24 hours. There's no policing or management or recovery. So even though we make plans for conservation, there's no financing and funding. There is a wildlife policy. There is a proposed wildlife national park plan that can conserve and protect monkeys, but we need political will and pushing, especially with this new incoming election period coming in, and also managing the pet trade. So next slide. To close off, what some recommendations and conclusions we have here is that primates are important as a dominant species for distribution and increasing population of seeding of forests, but also too, we have monkeys in both upland and lowland environments. They possibly occurred on the west coast, but human development and environmental changes probably pushed them out. We have to monitor the tufted and wedge cap populations, which could offset the white-fronted capuchin habitats, but also too that we need to do biological studies on our monkeys in terms of DNA work and so forth to compare them to the mainland. And lastly, next slide, is that we just have a big trade. This is photographs from the newspapers, from the internet about how big the trade is in monkeys, both eating them and trading them as pets. We haven't really stopped this. Guyana has ticked up a very serious law where you need monitoring permits, but also to add microchips, location microchips to monkeys. So then people who have monkeys, who are permitted as a pet, they could actually be tracked, and people, the wildlife authorities in Guyana know who has and where they are. So it's you can't trade any animal just like that, or bringing new animals from the wild. Hopefully they're cutting down the wildlife trade in terms of the wildlife pet trade. And lastly, let's go to the last two slides. Just to recommend, we really need further studies. We also need species conservation and recovery, and we need development planning. As a urban and regional planner, we need legal land laws. We have a new National Land Use Authority. We've gotten rid of the Tectonics Planning Act. There's a new Land Use Act that we should really implement in our national parks and our protected areas. And lastly, the last slide is to acknowledge those who have helped provide information for this project, and also to the sources and images used. I'd like to acknowledge everyone. Thank you very much. I look forward to any questions, but more so for you to report occurrence of monkeys throughout Trinidad and Tobago, our primates. Thank you. Have a good evening.